Welcome to the Strategy and Leadership Podcast, the podcast that brings you practical advice, lessons, and stories from senior leaders and thought leaders from around the world. The Strategy and Leadership Podcast is brought to you by SME Strategy, working with organizations around the world to create and implement their strategic plans. To learn more, visit SMEstrategy.net. And now, your host, Anthony Taylor.
Hey there, folks. Welcome to today's episode of the Strategy and Leadership Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Keith Farley. He spent 7 years at Stanley Black & Decker, now almost 15 years at Aflac, where he's a senior vice president for their largest U.S. segment. Just an awesome guy so far. Keith, what's happening?
All right, Anthony. Good to talk to you.
I'm excited. You're calling from Atlanta today. It's such a cool place to work, and I see that your entire career has spanned kind of the Georgia area, but I did my best to provide a good bio about you. You even worked at another company that I think is very cool, Atlanta grown, but why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about you, both professionally, personally, and then we'll get into the interview.
I'd be happy to do it. So, grew up in Chicago, but then moved to Atlanta when I was 10. So I consider Atlanta to be home, as you had mentioned there. Went to Auburn University, and from there did my first corporate job, which was at Coca-Cola, and actually did that while at Auburn. And I got one of the coolest jobs in the world in that I spent the summer at headquarters, and then the next 9 months I was on campus. And the cool thing about my job there at Coke was I got a parking pass that was like a vending parking pass to go check on any vending or fountain machine anywhere on campus, which means I could park anywhere on campus at any time and just leave my hazard lights on because I had the Coca-Cola parking pass, which was whatever they paid me was not worth what the parking pass was worth. That was the value of that job because I literally could just park anywhere on campus with that. It was like having a police car. But I did that for a year and then really started my career out of school with Black & Decker. Worked on the DeWalt brand there and spent 7 years at DeWalt. And then moved over to Aflac, about 15 years ago. Started off in marketing and then moved in from marketing to transformation, then started our innovation team. Moved to Northern Ireland to start Aflac Northern Ireland, which was our first European presence of employees. And then just 3 months ago, moved back to Columbus, Georgia. We were about an hour and a half from Atlanta, and this is where Aflac was founded in 1955 and remains to this day. So that's a quick bio of what I've been up to.
That's awesome. And so, I mean, curious about a couple things, like one, the difference between working Black & Decker and DeWalt versus working in like the various segments of Aflac, which, you know, if you want to talk about that. I'm also curious about, 15-year career in I'll call it an industry that's had to evolve over time, not only the product, but how it's serving its customers, and then the kind of experience of growing that across geography. So maybe I'll just ask you, what is your favorite part of your job now? And I'm assuming that you don't have this super parking pass that they give you from Aflac like you might have had with Coke.
No, I can't park anywhere on campus anymore, like I used to be able to. Yeah, I mean, I think the coolest part of my job, and this is something that's unique to health insurance, is that what I do and what we do here is people that come to us are oftentimes having one of the worst days of their life. They've been diagnosed with a terrible disease, they've lost a loved one, or they've been hurt in an accident, right? So these are people that are in really a rough period of time in their life. And what I find most fulfilling in the job here compared to other jobs that I've had is we get to be there and be like the only thing that happens good that day, potentially to them. We get to ease their burden, take a little bit of load off, and help them, understand, their options, give them some financial assistance if they're covered, all those types of things. So we meet people at a time in their life when they really need someone. And so that to me is most fulfilling. Now at DeWalt, we helped, a guy or a girl, drill more holes faster to get home to their family, or, cut more wood, with our saws, things like that. But again, we weren't meeting people on their darkest day. And here, that's what we do. So I love the opportunity that we've got and that my team has, the fulfillment that we get from helping people when they really need it, probably more than any other brand that a lot of folks have worked for, including myself.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, so I mean, I do like the kind of compare and contrast kind of thing without obviously giving any trade secrets or anything like that. But if I look at, you mentioned transformation and specifically with Aflac, how has your 15 years within the company, how have you seen the organization transform? And then I'm just curious, because of its mission focused, how does that mission come into play when you're looking at transformation initiatives, or you're just looking at how you can kind of serve the customer better? Do you bring it up in conversation? Is it just understood by everybody? And how does it impact kind of business decisions on a day-to-day basis? And I guess start with Aflac at the top part.
Great question. So the way that I've seen us change the last 15 years has been a lot more digital solutions. Obviously, mobile solutions, web solutions, even on the back end, how we brought in AI to do things. I've seen that change. And that has really, I mean, if I think back to when I started in 2009, so much has changed from that standpoint, and we've progressed so much. We've also expanded our products and bought some other companies and had some acquisitions. So that has changed in the 15 years I've been here. What hasn't changed, though, is kind of getting back to that first comment that I was making around, when people come to us, that hasn't changed. It's still an opportunity for us to make a difference in their day, make a difference in their life. And so that fulfillment, the mission hasn't changed, but the way that people interact with us has, to some extent, the products that we sell have. We've kept our flagship product. Our first product we ever had when we launched back in the 50s was a cancer product. And that essentially is a product that pays you cash if you're diagnosed with cancer, so you can deal with all the expenses around the cancer. A major medical that folks have here in the U.S. that pays the doctors and hospitals, but what Aflac does is we give you cash, and it helps pay your mortgage or your electric bill or your car payment or gas, groceries, whatever it is, and that hasn't changed. So with all the technology that's changed around and how people have interacted with us, the very core of what we do hasn't changed, and I like that from a consistency standpoint. That's what you want in an insurance company. The way they work, obviously, is you're paying money in that you expect that they'll be there later when you need them, and hopefully you never need them. But God forbid if you do, you want to make sure that they're stable and consistent. And so I like that we've had that consistency in the time that I've been here, and really in the entire life of the company. But yeah, it's been interesting to see how customers have purchased has changed, how they want to service their policies. We now have mobile apps where people file their claims completely online and don't talk to anyone. And then we have other people that they want to talk to someone. They want to understand, what their coverages are because they're going through something.
So as a manager, and if we look at it from kind of more of like an operational piece, like you've spent, career like in innovation, in change, partially in robotics and back into innovation, how do you approach that? Like, how do you have those conversations with your teams? And I'll say right now, there's some of the clients that we work with facilitating strategic planning. They've been doing something for so long, and going through that process of innovating and evolving as a company, they might not have the cash flows to buy somebody, but they have to adapt to future market needs. Otherwise, they'll just shrink their market. So what were the conversations that you had with your team? How do you approach innovation? And what are maybe some of the practical things that you've put in place to support that iterative as well as transformational growth?
I think because we're in the service industry, we don't sell a product that's physical. You can't touch it, you can't feel it. And if I compare back to my days at DeWalt, you can make an opinion of a DeWalt power tool based on how many holes it makes on one charge, or how many feet of lumber it can cut, on one charge. Or if you drop it and you pick it up, does it still work? So every moment that you use the tool, which for most folks is every day in the DeWalt professional world, every day they're getting to interact with the brand and have an opinion of if this is a brand that they like. With us, there is nothing physical. There's nothing you hold. There's nothing you see. There's nothing you taste or smell. And in fact, you might buy it and then not use it for a long time, if ever, right? You've bought protection. You've bought a safety net that you may or may not need. So that means what's really important for us is our service, because that's all we really sell is service, right? We're giving you that safety net and coverage, but it all comes down to the service. So when we approach innovation here at Aflac, we've really got to look at, if the thing that we sell is service and the relationships and the empathy that we have, don't automate, don't innovate that, right? Innovate everything and automate everything you can around that frees up more time to deal with the customer. So as an example, if you need to update your address with Aflac, there's opportunity for innovation there, right? There's opportunity for us to tap into big data. There's opportunity for us to look at AI and say we can help you do that. There's obviously the ability to do that in our mobile app. That's something that you probably don't need a human. You don't need relationship. You don't need empathy. And so those types of things, changing, adding a policyholder, deleting like a child that you've had the birth of a child, you want to add your child, or your child is aged out, you want to delete your child, changing your address, updating your bank account information, making a payment. Those are all things that I think that there's plenty of room for innovation and digital experience. And if we do those things and help innovate those, that frees up our time for those uniquely human experiences, like when you have that really bad day and you need to make a claim or you want to have a conversation. So that's how I approach innovation here at Aflac, is we don't want to innovate away the very things that we're known for and that people come to us for, which is that human experience when something has gone wrong in their life.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to ask you about how the change went for you when you went from DeWalt to Aflac, and just what I heard you sing is, the difference between selling something objective, hold per charge, or speed or reliability, versus something subjective. And then, going from selling the process and everything around the process to the product. One is driven by market and consumer expectation, as well as technology as a driver. And the other one's purely technology, get a bigger, more amps, more charge, more speed, what have you. Did you find that transition hard? Was it, how was your experience of moving from a product-based company to a service-based company?
For me, I didn't realize when I was making the change what a big difference it would be. To me, I was just moving from one big brand and opportunity in marketing to another big brand and opportunity in marketing. So to me, they looked kind of similar. It's just one Fortune 500 to another Fortune 500. But exactly what you hit on, and I was too young at the time to realize this. I was below 30. That I'm actually changing completely from a physical consumer goods to now a service and a financial services. And what will that be? I think the only thing in common between the two really would be speed, right? DeWalt's all about speed, your drill, your saw, whatever it may be. And Aflac's all about speed in terms of the payments that we want to get to you and get the cash in your pocket. That's probably the only thing. After that, everything else kind of falls apart. DeWalt's a product you use every day. Insurance is a product you don't, here at Aflac. DeWalt you can hold and feel and constantly make judgments of if it's doing what you want. Aflac is not something you can hold and feel. So pretty different. And what I realized is, for DeWalt, the product was the physical product that you were holding and using. And at Aflac, the product is that customer experience. And I've never, worked for a company before where the whole product you're selling is customer experience. There is no, even Delta Airlines, the product is the whole experience, but the flight is a big part of it, right? How was the boarding process? Were you on time? How was the flight? Was there turbulence? Did you get nervous? All of those things. So they have a product there. Ours is really, when you need us, are we there for you? And so we focus here on how can we make sure that we're there for you? How can we make sure that we're fast and quick and give you all the coverage you need? And that was probably a big change that I had underestimated when I was switching over.
So context is everything. So if you think of like the mentality of an employee, how does, and again, without giving anything proprietary away, how does the company communicate that? Like, what are the processes? What are the systems? What are the structures for everyone in the organization to know? Here's not necessarily our strategic priorities, but here's our either brand values, company values, product values. How does that get integrated with an organization so that when somebody comes in, they understand, how we do things? And I ask because there are organizations, every single organization is trying to deliver on their promise. And what I find senior leaders are not struggling to do, but would be well served to do, especially if they have 100 employees, saying, hey, how can we bring this ethos into the organization? Some very large brands that we know about have been really successful, and I'm trying to glean some of the ingredients that our listeners might be able to incorporate within their own organizations.
So I think one thing to remember for us is any insurance is almost like a subscription model, right? So you're paying a premium, you're paying it every other week, or you're paying it monthly. And our goal obviously is to get you to keep the coverage so that if that bad day happens, you're covered. And basically to constantly keep renewing your subscription. Unlike, a consumer products good or packaged good, you buy a television, hopefully it lasts you for 10 or 15 years and you're good. We're always wanting to make sure that people keep their coverage up to date so that they have their coverage when they need it. So for us, in the service organization with our employees, one thing that's very important to us is to have a claims paying culture, which sometimes is not what people expect from an insurance company. I mean, you think about when you call your insurance company, a lot of people think it's going to be an argument with their insurance company about why they should or shouldn't get paid. What we realize is if you pay people the claims, which they're owed, and you pay them quickly and you pay them fully and accurately, they're more likely to keep the product afterward longer, and they're more likely to tell their friends and coworkers. And because we sell most of our products through the workplace, if you tell your coworkers, I mean, that's my future target market is your coworkers, because you bought the product and maybe your coworkers didn't. And since we sell through the employer, that's important. So, we find with our call center, with our claims, we're constantly looking for ways to pay the policyholder as much as we can and as quickly as we can, not just because it's good for them, which it is good for them, and that's the promise we made, but it's also good for us because if they have a good experience, they'll keep their subscription, they'll keep, buying the Aflac. And if they don't and they have a bad experience, you lose them. They'll tell all their friends and all their coworkers, and keeping in mind those coworkers are your target audience, right? So it ends up, being very important for that reason. And so what that looks like when it manifests is I was sitting with our one of our claims agents last week, just watching how she uses our systems and seeing what improvements we can make. And this person sent in this claim paperwork, and she wasn't able to pay all of the claim the way that she wanted. And she was frustrated. She was like, "Oh man, I can't pay this guy for that. And man, I wish I could. Oh, that's terrible. I can't pay him for this because what he had happen didn't qualify. Some things did, but some things didn't qualify." And she was frustrated that she couldn't pay him. And I was smiling because I thought, this is exactly what we want. I don't want you to look for a way to not pay the customer. I want you to be frustrated when we can't pay the customer because whatever happened didn't qualify, for whatever reason. In this case, it was a previous injury that the person already had, and we couldn't pay for that previous injury. But we could pay for the new stuff that happened to him, but not the old stuff he'd already been diagnosed with before having the policy. But the fact that she was frustrated told me we've got the right culture, because I want her looking out for the customer and wanting to find ways to pay that customer. So I think culturally, that's how we bring it in, is sort of claims paying culture of saying, look, if you take care of the customer, they'll keep the coverage, and that's good for the company. That's good for the customer as well.
Yeah, I find that so interesting. And as you see, I wrote some notes here, but just obviously the culture piece of it that you've instituted that. But what I find so interesting is that payout is at the very end of your transaction, depending on how you look at the cycle as a one thing or a cycle. And you guys look at it as a cycle, whereas some might say, oh, selling is the most important work, like delivering. This is the most painful part for you as a company. But you said, hey, if we can manage this part and really do it well, then it will basically restart the cycle and allow us to support our customer ultimately. And so it's kind of like, flipping it on its head, that it could be saying, oh, we have to pay out this money, but no, great, we have to pay out this money because it means that they're getting the maximum utilization of the product ultimately. And that's how you drive satisfaction.
That's it. That is, and that's the best part of the process. Paying the claim is the whole reason we exist. It's the best part of the process. Even our salespeople will tell you that there's nothing that makes them happier than paying a claim, because the promise and commitment that they made during the sale has now come full circle to fruition, and you've gotten the payment. I was talking with a friend here who joined a car wash club, unlimited car washes, right? And he hadn't used it in a month. And the car wash club started reaching out to him to say, hey, make sure you get your car washed. And you think about it, you're like, well, why would they want him to come there? Because they're going to have to use soap and water and all these things with their, they've got these variable costs. Well, the reason they want to do is if he doesn't use it for a month or two, he's going to cancel his car wash membership, right? Mm-hmm. So they have an incentive to get you to use it. We have an incentive. We have things like a wellness benefit that we pay out where you get paid just to go see a doctor, even just for a checkup, COVID shot, dentist, all those things count. And we want to be in the business of giving you the experience of filing claim, even if you haven't had a serious illness or a tragic accident. We just want everyone to be able to file claims and have that interactivity with the company, because to us, it's an open loop. Until we pay that claim, it's an open loop that we haven't gotten to deliver the whole promise to you. And so, yeah, we do look forward to the day. We do things right now. We're trying to increase the amount of claims we're paying out. We're sending out reminders to people. You might have a claim to file. Please do so. It's great to work for an insurance company that's set up like that. And when you're the size that we are and the age that we are, and because of the way that we sell these health insurance products, we have a very big incentive to make sure that we're paying these claims quickly and accurately. And I can't imagine working for the alternative, where you're trying to figure out a way not to pay. And I'm sure those companies exist, but not here. For us, it is that is the biggest and most important moment. When you pay a claim, the circle is completed, and then it starts again.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's funny that you should mention, well, so I guess two things. One, when we have our implementation packages, like we want our clients to use it because that's how we show value. If we show value, they get the value, they want to work with us again. And then the other day, it's funny that you mentioned that example. So we have a small HSA health spending account at our company, and I'm on my wife's benefits and I try not to get sick. And so I was like, oh, it's just such a pain in the ass to do this stuff. I can swear on my own podcast. And I actually went through it, and literally the thing got processed like that. And I was like, well, dang, I should go to the chiropractor now. I should be using these things, which is obviously in my best interest, but psychologically, the resistance of me having to file paperwork and do this stuff was a pain. So I will actually shout out McNeil Benefits, Dave McNeil. Thank you for providing us a great HSA. If you are in British Columbia, probably across Canada, you can go check them out. And of course, if you're in the US, check out Aflac, and probably Canada as well. Keith, is that fair to say? Aflac in Canada?
The US. You got to be in the US for US or Japan. About 75% of our business is Japan, 25% is in the US. So if you're listening from those two countries, you're eligible. Otherwise, just follow us on socials and enjoy the duck, but we can't sell any products.
I was going to say, is the duck a cultural thing in Japan? That's why I picked up, but we can, unless you have an answer to that, is the duck a cultural thing?
It's funny. The duck is in Japan as well, but the duck is a little bit different. The duck in the US, if you've seen our commercials, is kind of boisterous. He's kind of loud. He's a funny part of the brand, and he yells Aflac. In Japan, that's considered rude to yell like that. So it's a much more subdued and kind of toned down duck that's a little more culturally appropriate for the Japanese. But yeah, the duck's big in Japan and big in the US. They're in both countries, but a little bit different personality depending where you are.
I didn't think that I didn't wake up this morning being like, I wonder what the cultural differences of the Aflac duck were going to be, but I'm better for it. So, Keith, I appreciate that. You'd mentioned we can follow Aflac on socials. Where can folks connect with you, learn more about the work that you're doing, and maybe connect with you if they're in Georgia or even across the US?
So for the company, obviously, Aflac.com, all the socials, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, that's the best place. There's a lot of great content that we've got on Instagram now going with the duck. And of course, college football is just wrapping up, but that's a big thing for us with Deion Sanders and Nick Saban. We've got a lot of content there. Again, I realize you're in Canada, so you may not be following American football the same, but that's a great place to find us. And the duck tries to bring a lighthearted feeling to what is a very serious company, because, we sell cancer insurance, heart attack, stroke, life insurance, accident insurance, all those things. And the duck is kind of the friendly, approachable part that, shows that we do serious work here at Aflac, but we don't take ourselves too seriously.
Yeah, I got that. Go Auburn, I guess.
Yeah, there you go. Go Auburn. You can say go Auburn. You can say War Eagle. It's really confusing. We have a lot of mascots. It's confusing, but yes, go Auburn's great.
Excellent. I wasn't sure if it was a dogs or otherwise, but we're not going to go there. We'll save that for another podcast. But Keith, really appreciate you chatting with me today, and just thanks for sharing your story and just what the company's up to. And by the way, isn't that a sponsored podcast? You're just doing cool work, and to let our listeners know, just wanted to give an opportunity for great organizations doing great things, give them a platform. So Keith, thank you so much for sharing with me today.
Appreciate it, Anthony. Thanks for the time.
Folks, my guest today, Keith Farley, who is SVP at Aflac. One of the things that I took away from our conversation today is, you can sell something very, very challenging, and you can sell something that doesn't really exist. But even through all of that, if you can build a culture of providing that real value at every single touch point, even if you haven't materialized the full benefit, and then make the delivery of that as easy and as valuable as possible, you'll build a great business. And innovation comes in a lot of shapes, whether that's trying to do something faster or better, or just making it more enjoyable. So for you as a listener, I encourage you to say, hey, what can you innovate? What can you improve slightly for your customer today? If you do that a whole bunch, you'll be better for it, and so will they. So thanks so much for listening to today's episode of the Strategy and Leadership Podcast. My name is Anthony Taylor. Enjoy some college football. Enjoy whatever you're up to today and this week. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Strategy and Leadership Podcast. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please consider giving us a review. We appreciate you listening and following along, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. And as Anthony says, until next time.